believe will be of great impact to anyone who is aspiring to be in any sector in technology, not only software engineering, which is commonly known. We'll get to know even other avenues of technology as well. But today we have a very experienced, someone who is so dynamic, and someone who has been in the tech industry for quite a while now, almost over 7 to 8 years. We thank God for him. Today we are hosting Mr. Stanley Ndagi. Stanley Ndagi is a software engineer. He's well versed with Scrum, Agile approach of software engineering. He has experience in remote work with cross-cultural, multinational teams across industries like fintech, agriculture, and education. He doubles as a technical writer. He's very keen on sharing his technical knowledge and supporting the developer experience of individuals and institutions that he works with. Currently, he's a technical writer, writing on API docs and tech guides for multinational fintech. He's an editor and author at Circle CI Guest Writers Program. Aside from work, he's also involved in community as well. He founded the Tekailing community, in short TK, and is also a GitHub star. So we are very honored to have you, Mr. Stanley, and we look forward to learning a lot from you, gaining from your experience, and even exposing us a lot on matters technology. So just once again, this platform is called TechSpace. In TechSpace, we do host different experts to talk about technology. We have sessions every month, and I'd like to urge us to feel at home. Thank you so much. So at this juncture, I'd like to give it over to Mr. Stanley, take it on from here. Welcome so much, Stanley, and over to you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. And you can see my screen as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just put this in presenter mode. Okay, so thank you so much, Sharon, for giving me the opportunity. And by extension, I can see Zephaniah representing Mantok. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And without further ado, let's get into this. So you've heard that my name is Stanley Ndagi. I right now introduce myself as a software engineer and technical writer. More can be seen on socials at Ndagi Stanley. And my current website or web profile is at md.engineer. So I would like us to think about, as far as this talk goes, I have this like a mantra: think about the trajectory or the journey and not specifically the destination. And in this case, we are talking about maximizing roles in tech. So I would like us to think about not the destination of a particular role, but think about the journey. And the journey can take different perspectives, different branches to get to one specific point. And somebody in a specific role can move on from that role to another role in different branches as well. I also hope to help by sharing my story and also other stories that I've seen and had within my somewhat short career. I now stand at probably around 8 years of being in the career space. Yes, and moving on solidly. So this talk I've broken down into two things. There's the variables and what are the constants. So anyone who is a software engineer or has got a bit of programming, you understand the value of variables and constants. So I just wanted to use that here. And in this case, we'll go through the variables here is a particular roles in tech. We'll get into the details of some of them, and opportunities and tips. So that's the that's the high level. But when we talk about constants here, I'll go into timeless thought processes. So not just think about roles in tech, but think about the value that tech is giving, or that particular role is serving in a society or a company is doing in a particular ecosystem. I'll talk about process. So not just looking at opportunities, but even going beyond the opportunities to create your own process of, this is how I. Thank you for muting. Apologies for that. Somebody must have joined with their mic unmuted. So I'll be talking about the process. And then lastly, instead of tips or over and above tips, I'll also talk about skills, because fundamentally, skills are the ones that will make you or make somebody go beyond the test of time. We could be in one particular area. We can talk about tips to get into a certain role, but beyond that, it's skills that really move you forward from one year to another, from one tech generation or computing generation to another, if you will. So variables, I've talked about variables being things that are liable to change. And as I said, roles, opportunity, and tips. So about roles, what roles are out there? And if we can have some engagement in the chat for those who can, and for those who can unmute themselves, I'd like to hear what are the roles that you know in tech. There's obviously a software engineer. Which other ones do we know? I'll give us a bit, like some few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, and we need to have anyone chime in the chat. Okay, you can see cloud engineer, UI UX designer. Anyone else? A CTO is a role, Chief Technology Officer. We have really fancy ones, yes, there's project management, product management. We have particular skills. You can hear mechatronics, maybe a mechatronic engineer, or that's a bit into tech. The Scrum Master, yes. Anyone else? We've heard of technician. Okay, software engineer. And we could talk about engineer in general, because the definition of an engineer is one, somebody who has the knowledge about a particular engine. So you're like, okay, do we have engines in software? Do we have engines in AI? Or which other engineer have I had? Cloud engineer. So that's a particularly interesting one. All right, so yeah, thank you for the engagement. So we've had AI engineer, software engineer, Scrum, project management, and there are quite a number, but for the sake of this course, for this talk, I'll limit myself to those roles that fall into the SDLC, which is the software development lifecycle. And in this case, they're traditional for those who are not necessarily engineers or engaged with software on a day-to-day. I'll break this down to be a repeatable process as far as a software is being developed. So there's a planning stage, feasibility, design and prototyping, software development, software testing, implementations and integrations, and operations and maintenance. But for those who are a bit technical, they'll be quick to let me know that it's not this linear. And that's where we talk about cycles or processes like agile. For example, there is waterfall. I won't go into the nitty-gritties. For anyone who's taking notes, you can just look at that. So waterfalls, SDLC, and there's the agile SDLC. But generally, in these steps of a software being developed, there are particular roles that come to mind. And you've already had someone say software developer, a software engineer, there's AI engineer. It seems a number of them were, a number of the roles that we were talking about are just in number 4. But you've heard of QA engineers or testers, that's in number 5. We can talk about the planning or the feasibility side of things, where this is where project managers and product managers come in. There's the design and prototyping. Someone gave an example of a UI UX engineer, designer, that is. So here are a number of other tasks, other roles. Some of them you might not have had them. Some of them are pretty familiar. So I recently was attending a certain meetup, and meetups are really good opportunities to meet people. And I heard of a role called a relationship manager. And generally in this case, this will apply for a company that's become significantly big, that the interface between the client and a company needs particular hands-on, a hands-on approach. So a relationship manager is one who is keen on maybe a certain client maybe they're using, so in this case was LinkedIn. And we know that companies use LinkedIn to post jobs, but beyond that, LinkedIn can give other offerings to companies. So one of them is training executives on how to write LinkedIn posts, because they are the voice of the company. And it's becoming very clear that CEOs, CTOs need to have a social media presence where they're talking and representing the company in some level. So this is where a relationship manager comes in. And you can figure out that, yes, this is not necessarily very technical, but it needs to have some foundational technical skill. A product manager, some people are the simplest way to describe a product manager is one who is in between the business value and the technical acumen. So in other words, a product manager prioritizes the tasks that are being done by engineers or developers, those who are implementing a solution, and also prioritizes those based on the business needs and also the customer needs. UI UX designer, UI means user interface, UX means user experience, designing the whole user journey for software. Software engineer or developer, some of us may not know the difference. I'll definitely go into the details much down the road, but generally a developer for most times does not necessarily write code or use a programming language to build a solution, but a software engineer thinks of has the computer science fundamentals, thinks about use programming languages as a tool. So a good example of a developer, you've heard of WordPress development. In this case, it could involve a bit of scripting, but not necessarily to the nitty-gritty of system design and things like this. Beyond that, we have QA. I've mentioned that's under quality assurance, and basically ensuring that a software meets the parameters that were set. Networking and infrastructure. and security. Yeah, this now expand to really detailed career paths. And particularly, I don't have experience in all of them. I've done a bit of networking. I've done a bit of SRE, that is a software reliability engineer. And you'll get this for mostly companies that are SaaS and also platform as a service. They are generally ensuring that software is reliable for their customers. So when you see an offering of a business saying that we ensure that you have 99.9999% reliability, SRE will be the one who is responsible to ensure that. Yeah, so I didn't mention this, but feel free to interject if you have any questions. I think we have the raise hand feature in Zoom, and also you can feel free to also add on the chats as we go. Sharon, as a host, am I still clear audibly?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So number 2 is opportunities. So yes, I'm speaking from where I am at right now, Nairobi, and that's what is highlighted here. But opportunities can, when you talk about opportunities in this day and age, a number of people think about the world being open, or people say the world is my oyster. In other words, yes, I'm in Nairobi, but I can have a role in a certain other country across the world. And in the fact that we have internet just making the globe, making the world a global village, it becomes really easy. But beyond that, I'd also like to propose other ways of looking at it. Opportunities here, I mean that you can look at roles based on, for example, location. So a bit of history here in terms of tech in general. Silicon Valley had its name from, basically you could, this is where the silicon chip, it has its roots from the silicon chips. And some years back, where Silicon Valley got its name, is most of the roles were, there are a number of hardware companies. There are a number, and these hardware companies were specifically keen on creating silicon chips. So a number of roles that were there will be embedded engineers, low-level engineers, people who are really close to the machine level, because what is being developed is operating system, embedded systems, and the like. But we can switch that to another location, and I'm just using this a bit lightly. So for example, another location where the main thing is not silicon, but a different thing altogether. For example, what can we call it? Yes, oil, for example, at the advent of oil being discovered, I'm really pushing the definition of tech here being new ways of doing things. So using oil for combustion engines instead of coal, that will be a thing. So any tech person in this case will be one who is keen on, or one who is using oil, for example, or understanding how to create the combustion engines on that end. So that's a very loose definition in that, or relation in that way. But something that we are more comfortable with is industry. We understand that we are in an age of fintech, and that is finance tech. This is where finance as an industry really merges with the tech industry. And this is in several layers. I've mentioned that I am a technical writer in a fintech. So in this case, I write API documentation for programmers or developers who work in fintechs like circles or banks who want to use the particular offering that the company I'm working with offers. And this, in this case, is creation of virtual cards or creation of physical cards. You don't necessarily, a client of the company I work with wouldn't necessarily have to be the ones who are creating the virtual cards or the physical cards. There are APIs that we help them create those. EdTech, that's education technology, and we can see a number of players in the market who are bringing this up. So just to make us still be in the same frame of mind of maximizing opportunities, it's important to know where opportunities are at, and you look at it as location-specific opportunities, industry-specific opportunities, and also now technology-specific opportunities. Yes, a number of engineers right now are in the web space. So talked about front end, back end, but we also have embedded systems. We have blockchain at the moment. We've had the metaverse also coming in. And I also mentioned that we also have some, we can have roles like WordPress developers. And in this case, this is WordPress being used as a tool, but becomes significantly big that there's a niche for a number of people to be WordPress developers and still have a career in that. Another one is SAP. You can be an SAP developer. You have certifications for that. We can also call like Amazon. You can be Amazon certified and the thing. So it's very specific to a particular technology being offered, but that can still be generally defined as a developer. So yeah, that's about opportunities. The last step here is tips. So what do I need to do? One could be, it's searching tips. So right now, LinkedIn is a very good source for searching for opportunities. But there are a number of examples, there are a number of tips out there in the internet on how to use LinkedIn. So I won't necessarily go into those details, but one particular tip that I can give is that I use LinkedIn specifically to see how people progress in their careers. So whenever I'm just or something, a random name comes up, like for example, Sundar Pichai, the CEO Alphabet and Google, you can start, if you just look at their profile, you can be able to see how somebody can progress to become that level. Or if you just search for a particular role, we've talked about the several opportunities, fintech and the like. So if you use LinkedIn as a tool, you can just go into specifically how, you can find a particular, somebody who is in a role that you are interested in and see how they got there. Some people don't have very elaborate LinkedIn profiles, but I believe you're getting my gist in terms of, if you get somebody who is really keen on how they progress to a particular role, you can be able to see how, and also hopefully apply that to yourself. But beyond that, you can also look for jobs in LinkedIn, and there are quite a number. And the specific thing to look for is the JD, job description, and a number, something that is that has been mentioned by a number of people nowadays is that if you can fit into 70 or 80% of the job description, that's probably something that's probably a role you can apply for. And yes, interviewing takes a lot of time, but there are also really significant benefits from interviewing. And eventually you do get to notice if that's your role, if that's something you're keen on, or you actually land a job. So the rest are pretty straightforward: job boards, career pages. You can look for a particular company and they're just interested by what they do. like talking about fintech, a company that comes to mind is Cellulant, for example. You can go to Cellulant. This is in Kenya. I think they also have presence in other countries. Look at their jobs board and see at their career page. And yes, you'll be on your way at least to know what you need. The rest, interviewing tips, quite a number of them. Salary, perks, and fee negotiation. This is particularly relevant in this day and age. We've talked about being a global workforce. So, and I believe at this moment we are in a market. Yes, let's call it a skills market. In this, I mean that it's not necessarily companies that are defining what the salary or perks are. Mostly they are influenced by the availability of, influenced by the engineers or the people, the talent that is out there. So it's a talent driven. And that's why you can see specifically in Kenya, a number of companies are saying that they unfortunately don't have role, they are really missing people to hire. And it's not that people are not out there, because when they get someone, the particular person has options, or they don't get, there's also the other flip side of the coin where a number of people in the talent space don't match up to what the roles are in the market. Yep. I'll skip over to the constants. And the constants here is what I mentioned, that what remains the same over time. So we've flipped to a number of things. Opportunities, let me just go through that. We've gone at roles, opportunities, and tips. These vary over time, but if we go to what are the constants, these three are the main ones. And there's somebody speaking over.
Yeah, Brenda Mwaura, I'd like you to mute kindly. Zeph, kindly mute Brenda Mwaura, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are moving over to the second half, which is constants. And this is what I hope will be really valuable to us. And that is not necessarily having and knowing the opportunities that are there, the roles that are there, the opportunities to get into these roles, and the tips on how to get them. But now, over and above that, knowing what value to give, or what value is needed by businesses or a certain society. The process of understanding these values, and also getting yourself to that point where you have the skill set to give this value to the market. And I might also add, this is the thinking that entrepreneurs in the tech space, and generally, I think in a general sense, they think about problems that are in a particular ecosystem. Think about the value that you're going to give, the process of giving that value, and the knowledge or skills that are supposed to be picked up along the way to continuously go on in this. So consider it like a loop. So I'd like you to, for those who have who can see the screen, I'd like you to look at this 4 characters. So we have a web developer intern, we have a software engineer, we have a principal developer advocate, and we have a co-founder and product officer. So there's one way you can look at this. These are 4 different people. And yes, even in this day and age, there is value of having a web developer intern. There's value of having a software engineer, a principal developer advocate. For those who are not conversant, a developer advocate is the one who, for companies that their main client is developers, like in my case when I was talking about APIs, writing APIs for developers. A developer advocate is the one who represents a certain company to developers. So either of 2 things. Their job description is that they pick problems that developers who are using a certain software come across when using the software, and then inform the business on how to improve that. Or 2, they help the business show developers how to use a particular software. So we have which companies come to mind with this role? Definitely developer productivity softwares. So we are talking about CI companies, that's continuous integration companies, software companies. We are talking about tooling companies, and examples here, like Google has developer advocates for their different offerings. We also have the Microsoft and the like. There's also co-founder. But in fact, now this might be surprising to a number of us. This whole loop, so we are looking at pharmacy technician, the ones that I've just added, TV series technical consultant, and venture capital advisor. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These 7 roles is the progression of one particular individual. So this individual, person X, the specific person, it's a lady in San Francisco. Her name is Jess Frazel. I think I could probably share the link somewhere. Yeah, let me just share it in the chat for some of us to look at the profile later on. Okay, one moment. Yep, so I've shared it in the chat. Okay, so the reason I'm highlighting this is so that we are clear that there isn't a straight path. And so in this case, this individual started as a pharmacy technician, became a web developer, in turn became a software engineer. When we look at co-maintainer, this is a maintainer of open source software, and then became a TV series technical consultant. For those who are who've watched Silicon Valley, she was the one who was writing the code snippets that are used in Silicon Valley, so that it gives a sense of this is product, this is relevant software. They're not just writing ABCD on the terminal. Then became a principal developer advocate, became a venture capital advisor. Those in business understand that you need advisors who are niche specific. So if you have a technically versed person as an advisor, you're probably going to be better at picking really good ideas for investing compared to someone else. And also currently is a co-founder and chief product officer of a company. So as I mentioned, there isn't any straight path. But what is very clear is that there needs to be a value proposition every time. And that's what you need to look at. And it takes a bit of studying to understand this. And what I want to tell us is that somehow this is my proposition of a process to get there. And that is one, discovery stage. I'll share my particular experience in all this, but you start by discovery. I've mentioned SDLC, that's figuring out what's discovering all the roles that are in the software development lifecycle, but also understanding what business value they give. So in planning, we understand that a planner will be keen on the resources the company has for software. Even think about yourself. Maybe a simple thing will be, I have a certain business, I need a website. You need to think about, okay, what will the website do for me? And that's the business value proposition. So then the next thing will be foundation. This is where you go into heads down. You go into learning the skill, learning programming, for example, or whichever skill that's needed. If you're I haven't mentioned this, but we also have social media managers. And the discovery could be, yes, there's social media, there's value of a business being in social media, but now you need to understand the skills of how to use TikTok to give awareness of a certain brand. And then there is the number 3, entry. So for software developers, this is where you categorize yourself as an entry-level developer. That I am now I'm being paid for my job. In this other side of things, you are just discovering there isn't a particular exchange of value. But yes, tools of trade, at this time, you've already picked up certain programming language or a framework and things like this. And then there's the upskilling. Upskilling here, we are talking about the hard skills. Now you are just writing, I'm being very specific here for a developer. So you're just writing a particular language, but now in the particular industry that you've joined or a company, you now understand that they're using a particular code editor. This is their framework. For example, for the social media example that I was giving, you get to understand that they have a specific tools they're using, like Hootsuite and things like those. Now you understand and learn that. But there's also the soft skills. I talked about relationship manager. A relationship manager will need to understand, how do I talk to people who are in C-level, and you could be intimidated with C-level people. So that's the soft skill approach. There's also the hard skills, negotiation skills, and things like this. So particularly for me, this is the general example of my timeline, where I started with the diverse subjects and then picked up an interest. My interest in this time, diverse subjects, we are talking about networking, we have security, we have software development and things like this. I picked up an interest, which became a software engineering. Yes, or let's say software development. Had an opinionated study. Here, I mean, going to the details of that particular language, for example. So discovery, foundation, then entry level, then you get to optimize with the tools. Upskill, that's you become really good at it, and then you pivot. So my particular journey has been this. In university, the first 4 years, or let's call it 3 years, you learn a lot. And sometimes people say that that's a waste of time. In my description, I thought that I'm now looking back, I'm saying that was a stage of looking at diverse subjects and figuring out, okay, this is not really helpful, but this is interesting. You get to be more diverse in your thinking with the discovery stage done. So in the foundation, particularly for the project and post-university, that's where I had basic deliverables. Yeah, basic deliverable in this case is a 4-year project, or post-uni, where you can, a number of people nowadays get out of university with portfolios, which is really amazing and awesome. So it gets to help you in the next step. which is now getting to entry level. In my case, my first job was a software engineer, SWE, and then picked up on growth, career growth, moved up from entry level to mid-level developer, then senior level developer. And let me just note that a senior level developer could be just in one company, but in another company, you're considered an entry level developer. So that happens. So it's important that you don't get really attached to a title. That becomes apparent as you go. And then eventually in the career growth, I pivoted to be a technical writer. So I want us to talk about that side in terms of pivoting, because a number of us could be in different industries. Some of us could be maybe in law and you want to get into tech. There are people who have been chefs or in other industries and they now switch on to get into tech. What I propose to you is that it will be important to go through these steps. Start the discovery stage, see what people are doing there, figure out the roles that are in tech. I've talked about the software development lifecycle, see what's on there. A number of us already gave roles within the proposed roles in the chat. So figure that out, get an interest. The best way to get an interest is a role that is similar, not similar, but has something that you've done. So for example, a lawyer who is getting into tech might decide to practice law, but represent tech companies. That's an example. But another switch case could be they understand that law gave them an aptitude of reading. So it could be something that could be interesting would be maybe computer research or tech research. That's just an example. But overall, what's really keen in the 21st century in terms of skills, because we've talked about process, now we are in skills, is that know and understand a particular subject domain. This is a general, but feel free to go really specific for your use case. Then the second thing will be skills. How do you use that knowledge? So if it's programming, for example, how do you use that knowledge at the end of the day? There are people who have noticed that they're really good at planning. So that is the knowing and understanding that you're good at planning, but this is how planning is done in software in the tech industry. When we are talking about agile, for example, then a certification could be, or like bridging that gap of knowledge could be getting a certification in Scrum. And then now move on into, you're now at the skill set. How do I use that knowledge? And then beyond that is how do you behave and engage in the tech space? So the tech space has some nuances and those are really hard to teach or transfer, but a good space will be attending meetups. You get to pick up on those, reading blog posts, you get to pick up on those and how the tech space generally runs. And then this is like a bonus because tech, we know that even just using devices, tech can really get to burnout. And so this is just a bonus in terms of this cuts across. It's important to, like as an individual, keep up with your sleep, be mindful. In this case, I'm talking about reviewing, introspecting. There's always opportunity to, not always, sometimes you might get yourself in a wrong path, but now in terms of mindfulness, it's better you take you always repeatedly on repeat think about where you're at and where you want to go, and hopefully you can be able to tweak that process. Movement here, I'm talking about exercising and just going around, not be a couch person or a sit, and nutrition. I think that's pretty straightforward. Yep. So a number of us in here might feel underwhelmed in terms of we didn't go to specifics, but in terms of like opportunities in tech and maximizing opportunities in tech, I believe figuring out what the variables are and what are the constants is really important. And that's why I decided to take this approach. But I'm happy to engage in questions at the moment and maybe later for specific examples or answers in your particular in a particular journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is the Q&A session. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank
I appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you so much, Stanley, for that. I think that was very candid and very nicely elaborated. We do appreciate so much. So the comment section is now open for any questions. If you have any questions related to how you can maximize, opportunities in tech, kindly feel free to ask your questions in the comment section, and Mr. Stanley will read it for us. We'll answer them for us. So Stanley, I do have a question. You initially talked about product manager, but then later on in the examples, project manager was highlighted. So maybe you can just clarify a bit of a difference between the two, who is a project manager and who is a product manager.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So there is also a third one, which is a program manager. So there is program, product, and project. So how I like to define the three is so program and product are similar. So let's first of all separate what's a project manager. When we talk about project management, we are talking about management of resources, but particularly project management gets into the finances. So a project manager will not only think about, let's talk about a software, for example. They won't necessarily just think about what are the features being built, when will they be ready to be deployed, but they're also talking about how much finance is needed maybe to hire the developers, how much is needed to buy particular maybe computers and things like those. That's what a project manager does. So they go into the nitty-gritty specifically in addition to finance. But a product manager won't have the finance bit. Mostly they won't. A product manager thinks about the product, still talking about a software product or a software product. A product manager thinks about the features that are going to be built, how they will impact the business. Yes, and there's also the third one, which is the program manager. So a program manager differs from a product manager in this way. A program manager is in charge of a program. So it's not necessarily a physical product or like a product you can point to. A program will be, I've talked about being an author and editor in Circle CI guest writers program. So that program accepts or involves writers, technical writers, but it also has a business side. These technical writers are writing tutorials that eventually people will read. If they like the tutorials, they can sign up on the product, and eventually, like you see, that's the end game. the business gets value because they have somebody who has signed up. So programs are not physical products, they are a process or a means to an end. So that's just one example, but whenever you think about a program, like, yeah. And let me give another example, like community programs are there. The Google developer groups, that's a program, that's not a product. So you'll have a program manager running that, not a product manager running that. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well explained. Thank you so much for that. I see a question by Silas Ndege, and also see Vio Kinyi has raised their hand. So Vio Kinyi, if you're in a silent place, kindly I'll request you to unmute so that you can ask your question.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah.
And thank you, Stanley. Meeting you again. We met last week during the YKT meetup. Yeah. I'll request that you go back to the slide where you had the 3 constants. I have a different opinion. Yes, the skill. If I got you right, or let's say if I didn't get you right, I feel the skill is not a constant, because as time goes by, skill will keep changing, and you'll be required to keep upskilling to the new skills in the market. A good example is recently Google launched the Google Carbon, which is going to be an upgrade of the C++. Yeah, so people who have been doing C++, they may be interested to learn the new skill, the new programming language that is now being launched by Google. So from where I sit, I don't think it's a constant. If you really need to grow and progress in your career, so in tech, you can't stop learning. You will learn, you like it or not. Or if you don't want, then you have to go to managerial roles where you will not have to do the dirty job. That's my contribution. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm glad we met, that you've attended and we met last week. Yeah, so about the skills or skill as a constant, I appreciate your take of things, and you're mostly right. But what I'm looking at is skill in this aspect. So I wasn't necessarily pointing to a particular skill like writing C++, but I'm talking about that skills or like possession of skills doesn't get out of, or doesn't change. You're always going to have need to know or have skills at the end of the day, but the skills will change in general. So that was my approach. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does, Stanley. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Victor. Moving on to the next question from Silas Ndage. I think this was clarified earlier on, but maybe he joined in later. So you can just clarify for him and also others as well who joined later.
Okay.
What distinguishes a software engineer from a software developer?
Yep. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So as software engineer, we can get into murky areas when you talk about what's the definition of an engineer. I've talked about an engineer meaning somebody who can operate an engine, but it doesn't get into the specifics as far as software engineering. But to the best of my how I can explain it will be a software developer uses a tool that is beyond a programming language. So in this case, we can have a WordPress developer who is using WordPress as a tool. WordPress has already been written by software engineers, but now a developer is on another layer. They're not necessarily writing WordPress or writing PHP that writes WordPress, but they're using WordPress to give or to have a product at the end of the day, or an offering at the end of the day. So that's how I define a developer. A software engineer is mostly somebody who uses programming languages to solve a problem. So and that's what I mentioned, that if you get onto software engineering, over time, you now understand that you need to think about optimization and things like those that not necessarily are in the domain of a software developer.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I hope you answered Mr. Silas Ndege. Just a minute. Yeah, Mr. Silas Ndege. I see you've raised your hand as well. I don't know if you have another question, or if you're in a silent place, you can unmute. That is, if just to clarify, if you have another question, or it was the same question that you wanted to ask. Yes.
Yeah, good evening. I hope I'm clear enough.
Yes.
Yeah, so Mr. Stanley, my name is, and to the rest, my name is Silas Ndege. I'm a student in the currently a second year. And you were talking about, about software engineer and software developer, I've heard very well. And I had, so you were talking about values. You said that values that you give in an ecosystem, and you gave an example with the profile you shared about Jesse Frazel, I guess. And according to how I was perceiving it, you are listing, I don't know if those are the areas that she has progressed in this tech world. And so my question was, now you see, like there I'm in campus at the moment now, I might tend to have a particular interest in something. And for example, if I take as Jesse Fraser, at what point do you gain the other skills that you develop and you progress? Because if I can see, she started off as a web developer. There was a time she was a pharmacy technician, and now she's a co-founder of something. I'm not so sure. So my question was, at what point do you come and gain all the skills that you require to progress so well in that field? Now that I might be interested in something right now, as I progress with life, as you said, you started with the university, and then the fourth year project or the post university, and so on and so forth. So in your process, do you discover all these talents that you want to use, or is it at the foundation, or when you begin already working, or how do we go about it?
Yeah, thank you for
Yes.
that. That's over to you, Stanley.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Silas. That's an elaborate question. So I'll try to bring it, like really squeeze it. So in terms of the transitions specifically, so in this case, for those who are seeing the screen, the transition was pharmacy technician, web developer, intern, software engineer, TV series, and then a TV series technical consultant, principal developer advocate, venture capitalist advisor, capital advisor, and then co-founder. So how do you transition? Yes, you have an interest, but how do you transition? So one, I've talked about, that was the second slide. Think about the trajectory, not the destination. So in this case, in the discovery side of things here, this is where I talked about interest. So we can say that you are in that stage, the interest side. But beyond that, I imagine that you're already doing some opinionated study. So in this case, you have an interest in maybe web development. Now your opinionated study is to figure out, oh, okay, there are these things, HTML, CSS, JS, okay. How do I use them? A basic deliverable, always in every programming language, is hello world. But you now gain on to, like for my example, going on to a fourth year project and then moving on. So to answer, how the major question here, which is you have all these interests or you have these capabilities. Now, how do you transition from one to another? At what point do you transition? And I'll also add another one. When do you not transition? Because sometimes you might actually have an interest, but it is not wise to transition. So I'll answer those three. One would be, so during this first job as a software engineer, my pivoting is right now I am a technical writer, but I did not start writing technically at this point of a career growth or that end. As a software engineer, I had already started writing, and my interest of writing actually goes before even university to the back in the day of secondary and primary days when you're writing composition. So that's where the skill of writing came up, but now technical writing came in when I was as a software engineer. So at the point of pivoting, switching from one to another or transitioning, that's what I talked about, that if you can see something that you have and something that you can pick up easily, that's what you now merge. And you pivot if it has value in the industry. That is, if there are actually roles in the industry and people are paid to do that. So that's when you pivot. But I'll need to remind us that the transitioning also has its edge cases. And that will be, for example, a technical writer in the market doesn't command a lot of financial, like they're not paid more compared to a software engineer. So you need to balance that. And in my case, I was a software engineer and also writing on contractual basis as a technical writer, just to get my feet wet to see if this makes sense for me. And then eventually I transitioned to now being a technical writer. But there's also trade-offs. I'm betting that hopefully I'll get to a point where I can balance off to what I was doing as a software engineer and what I was getting at the end of the day. But beyond that, as I've mentioned, it's not a destination, it's a trajectory. I'm thinking that I can be a better, maybe CTO, for example, if I have software engineering skills and then now transitioned to become a writer, because now I understand more of the business or I'm in touch with more clients. So eventually that can pay off at the end. So it's a sort of a bet. Sometimes there's a bet, but there's also some degree of a surety if I look at people who've done the same thing in the industry, or in looking at LinkedIn profiles and see, okay, yeah, this is possible. But as I said, there's no one straight path. So you kind of create your own path.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that is well clarified. Thank you for that. Maybe I can, maybe I can just add on, just to add on something. So changing careers, especially for some people who often, change career. For example, she was a pharmacist, then she moved to a web developer in turn. So for some people, they do change, they be very intentional on changing their career. So maybe they spend time in studying web development to a level where they can, launch their career as a web developer. That is one intentional way. But some people, meet up with opportunities, but then alongside through, practicing the opportunity itself. Like, for example, I've known some people, especially who have gotten into cybersecurity, which the foundation in most campuses are not well written off. But because there was an opportunity for cybersecurity, they were able to just pick on the opportunity and learn alongside the job. So shifting career, just as Stanley had said, it's a journey, it's not a destination. So thank you so much. Yeah. I can say we don't have any other question, but if you have any other question, kindly feel free to add it on the comment section. Yes, I see the time is 7:15. We usually conclude these sessions at 7 p.m. exactly. So thank you so much for everyone who is in the call at the moment, for your patience. I'd like also to appreciate those who joined us before and also have left maybe due to some other, meetings or stuff like that. So I'd like to appreciate you as well. So this marks the end of our session today. I hope to see you all again in our next month's session of TechSpace. So TechSpace is governed by an organization called Mantalk Worldwide. Mantalk is headed by Mr. Zefonditi, who is also amongst us. So thank you so much. If you have any questions regarding TechSpace or Mantalk, kindly feel free to ask them on our email, that is info@mantalkworldwide.com. Yeah, thank you so much. That marks the end of our session today. Thank you.